Welcome to the 100X Life Podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Hey, 100X Lifers, welcome back to the podcast. Oh my gosh, you did it. You succeeded at the 62-day challenge. You are at the end. This is the last day. We've done all the words of Jesus. We're just going to be talking about the practice of following Jesus now that you've made it through the challenge. You didn't do everything perfect. I pretty much can guarantee that, but that is not the point. The point is that you hung in there and did what you could. And that's what we're learning to do. We're learning to overcome the body. And I've heard a lot of chats on the Telegram stream, which you should do today. Check it and tell people, here's where I'm at. But people are starting to ask, wondering about cookies, and they're starting to talk about eating sugar again. Some people are like, will I even do that? I'll tell you, after going through this challenge, this is my third time, I'm pretty much off most sugar. I still will go back to just some, but only when it's inconvenient to not have it, and in very small quantities. Alcohol, pretty much eliminated most alcohol except for one particular type, and I usually regret having that. So that the water has always stuck with me. It really helps your health and your heart. Veggies are always a good idea. Plant-based foods are very strong along with your generous proteins. So that's your decision. The workouts, you've got some habits about working out. You're doing it automatically. My strong recommendation is that you continue those things. It's amazing how quickly the body takes back control over the mind when it's left to its own devices. So I hope that that's encouraging to you and that you actually stay the course. I'm going to be sending a link to become a 100X Life coach. This link, if you click on it, you can sign up and say, I'm interested in hearing what you got to say about becoming a 100X Life coach. You don't have to be 100% committed yet. In the show notes today, you will find that link. And then we're going to make it available in an email. And then we're also going to make it available on the Telegram channel. So you'll have multiple places to just register to say, I'm interested in that. I want to support your leadership. I'm going to be coaching the coaches. You're going to get a lot of FaceTime with me. As much as you would like. I'll tell you when it's obnoxious. And then selfishly, I want you to continue your 100X Life journey. I want you to be growing. Best way to grow many times is just to bring other people with you and be honest about where you're at. So look in the show notes today for that opportunity, and then you'll receive an email, and then also on the Telegram channels, you will receive that opportunity. Hey, yesterday's podcast, still thinking about it. It's really interesting because I make the point that you need to be a disciple in order to make a disciple. I was actually thinking about that last night. And another way to say it is you need to be on the narrow road in order to show people the way to that road. You have to be on it. You have to be on the narrow road to actually show people how to get to the narrow road. You got to try to say, come on over here. Your lifestyle is going to be saying, come on over here. I hope that podcast yesterday made sense. I'm really trying to expand and double clicking on his Great Commission and what it really means. I think the part, and I hopefully made it clear, that's lacking is that making disciples includes obedience to the things he commanded. And that brings us elegantly to today's word. This is a word of Jesus, and actually we've had this one before in John 15 and a different verse, but I'm going to lead in with this to talk to you about the practice of following. We have been on this journey. You're at the end of this journey. The whole point of this journey is that you would learn how to follow Jesus. Jesus is going somewhere. He's taking us on a journey, and that journey leads to the Father's house, but we cannot know the way to the Father's house. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And when he says, I am the way, he's actually saying, I'm the way to the Father's house. That's what he's saying in John 14. So let's look at this verse for today. This is Jesus speaking in John 15:10. He says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. Wow. It's just, I'm going to read it again. If you keep my commandments, you will abide. And that word means to live in, to dwell in. You will dwell in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and I have lived in his love, would be another way to say it. And isn't that beautiful? But how many times are we called to attention that that is what we need to do to live in his love? And I've said this before on this podcast, that the other way is just being whapped upside the head with the Holy Spirit. And then all of a sudden you're a love machine because God causes you to live in his love. And you can actually do his commandments because of the supernatural power and effects of Holy Spirit. And then I think Jesus' expectation of us, if we're going to find the narrow path, is we have to keep his commandments. So this whole entire process, the Jesus 100X life process, the whole reason for this book is to keep us focused on what it means to live in his love. And that is that we are actually committed to keeping his commands. We have to keep them before us. And you know what? We're going to be at different places with every single word of Jesus that we've looked at. We've looked at 55. That's a lot. And some of them, if you go back to your journal, some of them, and you look at your assessment, you're going to assess less. Some are going to be more. You're at a different place, it turns out. Just like we talked about, be perfect. You're at a different aspect of perfect in every single one of these words, the receiving and the retaining, the resisting, the refocusing, and the reproducing. So a good strategy now is to focus on putting into practice the few words that stood out to you. What are the words that stood out to you? We're going to ask that in the journaling prompts today, and get the Father on board with what is the word that he wants you to focus on. What is the word that Jesus wants you to focus on? What is the word that Holy Spirit's like, hey man, if you get this one, you're going to really take it to the next level of living in Papa's love. That would be such a good way to do it. So stay focused. You can consider joining a group. A lot of 100X Life coaches are talking about actually having a word a week and actually doing a meetup or a coffee on that one word. If that's you, please put something in the Telegram channel and say what you're going to do. And that you're going to be a coach. That's a really, really good strategy. I want to support you in that, give you anything you need to do that well. And then I want to call attention to the Old Covenant in Psalm 103. Psalm 103 tells us that God made his acts known to Israel, but to Moses, he made known his ways. So in the Old Covenant, God's ways are kind of mysterious. And Moses was the only one who knew them. Israel only saw the stuff that God did, the pillar of fire, the parting of the Red Sea, the supernatural water flow, supernatural bread delivered to them every morning. All these things, they saw his acts, but Moses knew his ways. And I want to suggest to you that in the new covenant, Jesus gives us his ways. He gives us the Father's ways. It is now possible for you to know his ways. And maybe that means for you, his ways of love, his ways of living the abundant life, his ways of abiding or living in the Father. You have all his ways now in all 55 words of Jesus and those things that he's commanded you to do. Just like I said before, that is the way to the Father's house. The way to the Father's house is Jesus, and then it's by living his commands that we learn to live in the Father's love, which is his house. And what's, I think, really crazy, and I put this in the book, it's just a childhood story of my dad getting me a unicycle for a birthday, age 10. And so the challenge there is a unicycle. I don't know if you know much about unicycles, but let me tell you, if you've never ridden a unicycle before, it's impossible. Like, it feels like it's an impossibility. If you didn't see someone actually ride a unicycle, you might never try because it looks so impossible. And when my dad got it for me for my birthday, The guy who sold it to him said, hey, make sure you keep the old seat on until he could ride it. Then you could put the new seat on. And that was really great advice because I failed and failed and failed. And every time I failed with that unicycle and I held onto a wall and then I tried to get it going, inevitably the seat would always fly out from underneath me and hit the ground and get more smashed. It was failure, 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 failure. And it went on for weeks. For weeks, I was failing and not succeeding. And, it's really interesting with the words of Jesus. I think it's really easy for us to not believe that we can live one of his words. And that is required. Like, for example, do not worry. Do you believe that it's possible for you never to worry? If you don't believe it's possible for you never to worry, it's going to be really hard for you to train for that skill. And that's the 100X Life process, is training for that skill, which would be to reprogram your brain to automatically not worry or move into thankfulness naturally. And that's the case just like with the unicycle. When I was failing and failing and failing, if I didn't believe it was possible, I would have given up. You've got to believe it's possible. And then you've got to retain the word that you want to put into practice. You've got to keep it before you. It's got to be top of mind. You've got to retain it. And don't worry, because the enemy's going to show up. And on that unicycle journey, man, it felt like an enemy. I don't think the enemy is fault in my unicycle journey, but trial after trial after trial, and just seeing very little progress. There was progress, but it was very, very slow to happen. And so I needed to hang in there and invite the fact that there's going to be failure. That's part of the process. There has to be failure. And in living the words of Jesus, when the enemy comes, it's going to be practice. Enemy's going to bring the opposite word. That's typically what he does. So if you're trying to work on not worrying, he's going to bring a lot of stuff to worry about. Either he's going to implant it in your mind, or he's going to try to orchestrate a situation where you've got lots to worry about. So there you go. Now you've entered the gym. Now you're practicing riding the unicycle. Now you're trying to rewire your brain to respond to the enemy's counterattack with the behavior that you would like to see happen. Automatic, Jesus following behavior, in this case, worry, to automatically not worry. But you're gonna fail. You resist the enemy's counteraction and you're gonna fail. It's gonna happen. You're gonna fail and you're gonna fail and you're gonna fail and you're gonna fail. So number 4, don't think of failure as sin. I think this is where Christians really make a misstep. The cross has paid for it all. It is completely finished. There is no sin that is not paid for. In fact, I would suggest maybe it's not even sin anymore in its original form. There must be a transformation, because Jesus is the fulfillment of the law. The law has been fulfilled. I know there's bad things. Maybe we can still call them bad things. But the original version of sin is that we were slaves to sin and we had to be slaves to sin. But because of the cross, we are no longer slaves to sins. Maybe we still have the evidence of sin slavery, but we have the capability of being slaves to righteousness. If you think that every time you fail, it's a sin issue and you join the enemy and you beat yourself up, it's not going to go well for you. You can just imagine me on my unicycle. This makes no sense at all. What if I was on the unicycle and every time I failed, I just started beating myself up and telling me I'm no good and telling me I'll never be able to ride? There's no way I would be able to stay in the game and in the gym if I didn't think failure was standard operating procedure for my mind transformation. Don't beat yourself up. Stay in the gym. Visualize this is a gym. The cross allows it to be a gymnasium experience for your training. You're training for reigning. You're training the unconscious brain to do new automatic behavior. That takes a lot of work. Reproducing happens when your brain switches to the behavior you desire. And on that unicycle, I started to do, like 7 or 8 pedal strokes in a row without following. My body was starting to get it. My mind was automatically doing the counterbalancing moves that were required to keep me on the unicycle. I started making the capability of riding. In fact, it got to be so good that I could ride all the way to my elementary school on my unicycle, which was about a mile away, and it was no problem. I could hop curbs. I got really good at balancing. I could stop on a dime. I could pivot. I could reproduce the talent of unicycle riding. You're going to get good at living one of the words of Jesus. Let's say worry. You get really good at that. You're not worrying. You've got hopeful thankfulness every time something bad happens. You're constantly looking for the opportunity in the storm. These are the natural behaviors of not worrying anymore. But then, which inevitably happens, is the distractions of the world come. So this could be the desire for other things, the deceitfulness of wealth, the cares of this world, the three things in the parable of the sower that Jesus says are going to make the word unfruitful. So in the area of worry, maybe the cares of this world get a little bit overbearing. Maybe you accumulate so much wealth, you begin to worry, have a different form of worry of actually losing it. That's very common. And on that unicycle, I rode that unicycle pretty briefly. I was able to really ride it, but then it was short-lived. The bicycle was a little bit better thing to do. And later on in life, actually much later, in this probably my 30s, I actually saw a guy riding a unicycle and I said, hey, can I try that? I was actually curious. Am I going to be able to get back on that unicycle? Do I know how to ride that unicycle? And the guy was very kind. He let me try it out. And much to both of our amazements and relief, I rode the unicycle down the sidewalk, spun on a dime, and came back like it was nothing. I knew how to ride it. My brain had been rewired. Just like with the word of Jesus, you're good at not worrying, but then a new care of the world comes in. That's when we need to refocus. So with the unicycle, I could just get back on the unicycle and do it, but I had to get a unicycle and get on it to prove that I could still do it. You're going to need to train on a word of Jesus now and then to keep yourself sharp. New things will be brought to increase your ability, to increase your potential. And all it takes for you is to get back on the unicycle, or in this case, get back on the word of Jesus. Do not worry, refocus, and use all the skills that your unconscious mind has already developed to help you be successful right now. So I hope that that's encouraging. We are at the end of the challenge. And guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be dropping a podcast once a week of encouragement. Sometimes it'll be an interview. Sometimes it'll just be a Rob coaching session of encouragement on a particular word or something that we're learning. But we're going to keep this podcast active. And if it's been valuable to you, share it with a friend. Share the book with a friend, invite some friends, stay in community on this. That is one of the key things, is to stay in community. Become a 100X Life, or assist the 100X Life in rallying some guys, some women, some marrieds, or whatever that looks like. Maybe you teach some kids. I mean, wouldn't it be great to learn the 55 commands of Christ as children and say, these are the operating procedures of the kingdom. This is the operating system of love. This is the way to the Father's house. Jesus has spelled it all out for us. This is how we abide in the Father's love and become like him. That would be really, really amazing. And I'm going to be here to support you every step of the way. Congratulations once again. So proud of you completing this challenge. We're going to definitely have one next July 2nd. You'll hear about it. And then I will be continuing to support you as best I can. Look at the 100X Life link, 100X Life coach link. Sign up for that, and I'll be getting back to you shortly on what that entails and how I can support you. 100X Lifers signing out for the 62-day challenge. Bless you guys. See you soon. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services with music by Ryan Ellis.
lost, but you found me here. And your fire burns inside, it will not disappear. Because the Spirit